Not only did Dylan touch lives out in the field, he leaves a large hole right here in the TV20 newsroom. Personally, I got to work with Dylan as his 4 p.m. producer. The last few weeks he worked here, and there was not a day that went by that Dylan Lyons did not enjoy this job. That sentiment is shared by others who worked here. Former TV20 meteorologist A.J. Willey posted on Twitter this morning, quote, "Had the pleasure of working with Dylan for about 2 years at WCJB, and that things got a little rowdy when the two anchored together. They nicknamed each other Willie and Dilly." And former weekend anchor and reporter Brianda Villegas posted a video of the time they shared outside of work, chugging sweet tea and eating vegan cheese. His partners on the First Look at 4 also remembering Dylan. Forecaster Nicolette Zangara sent out that she's struggling to find words to describe her feelings. Meteorologist Alex Carter shares that his thoughts and prayers are with Dylan's family and fiance. Again, this is an indescribable feeling, something we're all grappling with. We as colleagues, as professionals, and even as friends and community members are mourning, not just here in North Central Florida, but across the state and country.